Welcome back, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the shadows of history. Whether you're tucked away in a quiet corner as the evening unfolds, with stars just beginning to pierce the sky, or winding down in the hum of a lively city, I'm so grateful you've chosen to join me. I do love to know where you're re-listening from, perhaps a sleepy village where the night feels still, or a bustling town where lights flicker like distant candles. Share your setting in the comments below and tell me how these stories of the past make you feel. If these tales spark your curiosity or bring a moment of calm, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from history are waiting to share their stories with us, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. Now, settle into your favorite spot, let your breath slow, and allow your thoughts to drift to a world where power was woven from bloodlines, alliances, and the delicate threads of medieval politics. Tonight, we embark on the first of a 12-part series exploring the real lives of medieval queens, not the glittering heroines of fairy tales, draped in silk and crowned with effortless grace, but women of flesh and blood who navigated a world as perilous as it was grand. These were women of sharp intellect, quiet strength, and unyielding courage, shaped by forces beyond their control, yet finding ways to wield influence within the tight confines of their roles. Picture a young woman, barely 14, standing in a cold stone chamber within a towering castle. The air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke and rich tapestries embroidered with golden threads catch the flicker of candlelight on the walls. She is surrounded by wealth her subjects could only dream of, velvet gowns that shimmer in the dim light, jewels that gleam like captured stars, a polished silver mirror reflecting her youthful face. Her ladies-in-waiting move with practiced grace, lacing her into a dress so heavy with gold embroidery it feels like a second skin, more burden than adornment. As she gazes into that mirror, her reflection tells a story not of glamour, but of duty. Her marriage was sealed years ago, perhaps when she was still a child playing in her father's halls, a pact to bind kingdoms or secure a fragile peace. She may not know her husband-to-be, may not speak his language, yet soon she leave her home, cross foreign lands, and step into the role of queen. This was the reality for countless medieval queens. Marriage was no romance, no tale of love or choice. It was diplomacy sealed with their futures. Their feelings were irrelevant, their desires buried beneath the weight of duty. To be a queen was to embody a paradox, to hold a position of unmatched prestige, yet to be powerless over your own path. You were the most visible woman in the realm, your every gesture, every word, scrutinized for hidden meaning. Your role demanded grace, piety, and, above all, fertility, but failure in any could spell disgrace, annulment, or even death. The crown was both a privilege and a prison, a symbol of power that came with chains of expectation. Let's meet Eleanor of Aquitaine, a queen whose life captures this paradox in vivid color. Born around 1122, Eleanor was no mere noblewoman. As heiress to the Duchy of Aquitaine, she controlled lands wealthier than the Kingdom of France itself, stretching across what is now southwestern France, a region of vineyards, rivers, and vibrant culture. Her inheritance made her one of Europe's most coveted brides, a prize that could tip the balance of power. At just 15, she wed Louis VII of France, a union designed to merge her rich duchy with the French crown's authority. It was a strategic match meant to strengthen both realms, but Eleanor was no passive figure. Educated in Latin, poetry, and music, she brought a vibrant energy to the austere French court, her Aquitanian flair standing out like a flame in a gray dawn. Her love of colorful gowns, her patronage of troubadours, and her sharp wit set her apart in a court that prized restraint and piety. Yet even Eleanor, with her wealth and charisma, was bound by the rigid demands of queenship. As Queen of France, she faced unrelenting pressure to produce a male heir. In the medieval world, a queen's worth was often tied to her ability to secure the succession. to provide sons who would carry on the dynasty. Failure to bear sons or bearing only daughters could destabilize a kingdom, invite accusations of divine disfavor, or lead to a marriage's end. For Eleanor, this pressure was heightened by her husband's monk-like devotion. Louis VII, more suited to a cloister than a throne, was an awkward match for Eleanor's lively spirit. Their marriage was strained, her bold fashion and love of poetry drawing suspicion in a court that valued austerity. Whispers grew about her conduct, her elaborate dresses, her failure to produce a son quickly enough, her rumored flirtations with courtiers. These weren't just personal critiques. They were political, threatening her position and the stability of the realm. The role of a medieval queen extended far beyond the bedchamber, though that was where much of her duty lay. She was expected to embody Christian virtue, attending Mass daily, sometimes multiple times, her prayers a public act as much as a private one. Her life was a series of choreographed rituals, from the moment she rose to the moment she retired. Privacy, as we know it, was a myth. Her bedchamber, far from a sanctuary, was filled with attendants, ladies in waiting, courtiers, servants who watched her every move. Even in her most intimate moments, her body was not her own. It was a vessel for the dynasty's future, her pregnancies a matter of state concern. A queen's words, her gestures, her choice of whom to favor or dismiss were dissected for political significance. A single misstep, a poorly chosen word, a glance misinterpreted could spark rumors of disloyalty, witchcraft, or treason. This scrutiny brought dangers unique to queens. Childbirth, the cornerstone of their role, was a gamble with death in an era without modern medicine. Queens faced the same risks as all women: complications, infections, high maternal mortality, but their failures were public, their losses politicized. A queen who bore no sons might face annulment, exile, or accusations of divine wrath. Those who survived childbirth often endured the grief of losing children to disease, a common tragedy in a world where half of all children died before adulthood. Yet a queen could not mourn openly. She had to maintain a regal facade, her sorrow hidden behind a mask of composure. The pressure to produce heirs wasn't just physical, it was emotional, political, and spiritual, a burden that shaped every aspect of a queen's life. Let's consider another queen, Isabella of France, known later as the she-wolf for her bold actions. But in her early years, a young woman caught in the same web of expectations. Married at 12 to Edward II of England in 1308, Isabella was a pawn in a peace treaty between England and France. Her youth and beauty were celebrated, but her role was clear: to bear heirs and strengthen ties between two warring kingdoms. Like Eleanor, she faced a husband ill-suited to her Edward, as favoritism toward his courtiers caused scandal and strained their marriage. Yet Isabella learned to navigate the court, using her charm and intelligence to build alliances, even as she faced the same pressures to produce heirs and maintain an image of perfect piety. Despite these constraints, many queens found ways to wield real power. They became patrons of the arts, commissioning illuminated manuscripts, music, and grand architecture that shaped their kingdom's cultural identity. They founded monasteries and convents, forging alliances with the church, a formidable force in medieval politics. Some queens, like Eleanor, defied expectations entirely. After her marriage to Louis VII was annulled in 1152 officially for consanguinity, though her failure to produce a male heir was a silent factor, she married Henry II of England just weeks later, bringing her vast Aquitanian lands to his crown. As Queen of England, she governed as a regent, patronized poets, and even joined military campaigns during the Crusades, proving queens could shape history far beyond the nursery. Her court became a hub of culture, spreading the ideals of chivalry and courtly love across Europe, influencing literature and art for centuries. The medieval court was a labyrinth of alliances and rivalries, a chessboard where queens had to move with precision. Nobles could be allies one day, enemies the next, and a queen's survival hinged on her ability to read the shifting tides of power. Knowing when to offer favor, when to withhold it, when to speak, and when to stay silent was an art form. The soft power was a queen's greatest tool. She influenced policy through suggestion, built networks through kindness, and shaped outcomes without ever appearing to challenge male authority. Eleanor mastered this art, creating a court in England that became a cultural beacon, while Isabella of France later used her influence to orchestrate political upheaval, proving queens could be as strategic as any king. But this power came at a steep cost. A queen's life was a performance, her true self buried beneath layers of protocol and expectation. She was a symbol, a bridge between kingdoms, a vessel for heirs, a reflection of divine order. Her intelligence, her fears, her dreams were secondary to her role. Picture our young queen again, standing before her silver mirror. Her gown glitters with gold thread, her table gleams with silver plates, but these are chains as much as privileges. She knows her worth lies in her womb, her piety, her ability to navigate a world that watches her relentlessly. Yet, in her quiet moments, she dreams of leaving her mark, perhaps through a poem, a monastery, or a well-timed alliance that shifts the course of her kingdom. This was the truth behind the crown, not a fairy tale of endless splendor, but a life of relentless pressure where survival demanded wit, adaptability, and courage. Medieval queens lived in a world of stark contrasts, beauty and danger, power and vulnerability, privilege and sacrifice. Their stories challenge the myths of chivalric romance, revealing women who were far more than decorative figures. They were diplomats, patrons, sometimes warriors, whose influence shaped the medieval world, even as they navigated its cruelties. Their lives were not just about grand ceremonies or glittering jewels, but about the daily struggle to balance duty and ambition in a world that demanded perfection. Let's linger in this world a moment longer, imagining the rustle of silk gowns on cold stone floors, the glow of candles, casting shadows on ancient walls, the quiet strength of women who bore the weight of crowns and kingdoms. Their lives were defined not just by moments of triumph, but by the daily grind of rituals, scrutiny, and survival. What was it like to wake each morning as a queen, to face a day where every choice carried the weight of a realm? Let's step into that world now, exploring the intricate routines that shape their mornings, the crushing demands of their courts, and the delicate balance they struck to endure it all. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, picture the first light of dawn creeping through a narrow castle window, its soft glow catching the edges of a velvet curtain. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of damp stone and burning wax. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls for morning prayers, pulling us deeper into the lives of these remarkable women. Whether you re-listening from a quiet hamlet where the world feels still, or a bustling city where the day is just beginning, I'm so glad you're here with me. I do love to hear where you rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and tell me how these stories of the past resonate with you. If these gentle dives into history spark your curiosity or bring a moment of calm, please consider subscribing. There are so many more tales waiting to unfold, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. Last time, we met queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine, women who bore the weight of crowns and kingdoms, navigating a world where power was both a privilege and a prison. We saw how their lives were shaped by arranged marriages, relentless scrutiny, and the unyielding pressure to produce heirs. Now, let's step into their daily lives, into the grind of royal routine that defined their existence. This is part 2 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we explore the daily grind of queenship, the morning rituals, the court duties, the suffocating lack of privacy, the administrative burdens, and the physical toll of a life lived in the public eye. These were not just moments of ceremony, but a relentless performance where every choice carried the weight of a realm. Imagine waking before dawn in a vast stone chamber, the air chilly despite the fire crackling in the hearth. For a medieval queen, the day began not with quiet solitude, but with a flurry of activity. Attendants, ladies in waiting, maids, and chamberlains were already present, their soft footsteps and whispered instructions filling the room. The queen's morning was a ritual, a carefully choreographed dance that began with dressing. This was no simple task. A queen's wardrobe was a statement of power, her gowns heavy with layers of silk, velvet, and embroidery, often weighing as much as a suit of armor. Each fold, each jewel, was chosen with purpose, signaling wealth, piety, or allegiance. For someone like Matilda of England, who fought for her right to the throne in the 12th century, her choice of a crimson robe or a gold-embroidered mantle could sway nobles' perceptions, reinforcing her claim in a world skeptical of female rule. The act of dressing was public, a ceremony known as the toilette in later courts, though no less formal in the Middle Ages. Ladies in waiting laced corsets, pinned veils, and adorned the queen with necklaces and rings, each item a symbol of her status, but this was no moment of vanity. The queen was on display, her appearance a political tool. A Muscosan color or a poorly fitted gown could spark whispers of carelessness or disloyalty. For Blanche of Castile, who ruled France as regent for her young son Louis IX in the 13th century, her simple yet regal attire, often white to symbolize purity, sent a message of authority and piety, calming a fractious court. Yet the weight of these garments, often layered with furs and jewels, was exhausting, restricting movement and causing physical strain over long days. Once dressed, the queen's day moved to prayer. Piety was not just personal, it was a cornerstone of her role. She attended Mass, often in a private chapel within the castle, surrounded by her household. The service was long, filled with Latin chants and incense, and her presence was a public act of devotion. Queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine, known for her vibrant personality, still knelt for hours, their piety scrutinized by clergy and courtiers alike. A queen's faith was a shield, protecting her from accusations of immorality or heresy, but it was also a performance her every gesture noted. Missing Mass or appearing distracted could fuel rumors, as it did for Margaret of Anjou, whose piety was questioned during England's Wars of the Roses, painting her as a scheming outsider. Breakfast followed, but even this was no private affair. Meals were public, served in a great hall filled with nobles, petitioners, and servants. The queen sat at the high table, her food often bread, ale, and perhaps roasted meat presented with ceremony. Every bite was watched, every choice of dish analyzed. A queen who favored simple fare might be praised for humility, but one who indulged in exotic spices, like those Eleanor brought from Aquitaine, risked accusations of extravagance. The table was a stage, and the queen's role was to project grace under pressure. For Blanche of Castile, meals were a chance to observe her court, noting which nobles whispered together, which factions were forming. Her sharp mind, honed by years of regency, turned even a shared loaf into a moment of political strategy. After breakfast, the queen's day turned to court duties, a grueling blend of ceremony and statecraft. Holding court meant receiving petitioners, merchants seeking favors, clergy requesting funds, or nobles pressing for land disputes. Each interaction was a test. A queen had to listen patiently, her responses measured, her decisions reflecting the king's will, or, in the case of regents like Blanche, her own authority. Matilda of England, during her struggle for the crown in the 1140s, held court amid civil war, her every ruling a chance to win allies or alienate enemies. A single misjudgment favoring the wrong noble or dismissing a powerful bishop could shift the balance of power. Yet, queens had to appear serene, their authority cloaked in feminine grace to avoid accusations of unwomanly ambition. These duties required a keen mind, but most queens had little formal education. Unlike their male counterparts, who might study law or theology, queens were taught feminine skills, embroidery, music, or basic literacy in Latin. Their political acumen was learned through observation, through listening to advisors or watching their husbands' courts. Blanche of Castile, for example, had no formal training in governance, yet as regent, she managed France's finances, negotiated with rebellious nobles, and even led military defenses. Her success came from years of watching and learning, a silent education in the art of power. This lack of formal preparation made every decision a high-stakes gamble, where instinct and cunning were as vital as any book. The lack of privacy was perhaps the most suffocating aspect of a queen's daily life. From the moment she woke, she was surrounded by ladies-in-waiting who dressed her, by chamberlains who managed her household, by scribes who recorded her orders. Even her bedchamber, where one might expect solitude, was a public space. Attendants slept nearby, often on pallets at the foot of her bed, their presence a constant reminder that a queen was never alone. For Eleanor of Aquitaine, this lack of privacy was a source of tension during her marriage to Louis VII. Her lively nature clashed with the French court's expectations, and rumors of her conduct fueled by her ever-present entourage dogged her reputation. A queen's life was a performance, her every moment staged for an audience that judged her ruthlessly. Administrative burdens added to the daily grind. Queens often managed vast households, overseeing dozens or even hundreds of servants, from cooks to falconers. They balanced budgets, ensured supplies for feasts, and maintained the castle's stores tasks requiring precision in an era of scarce resources. Blanche of Castile, as regent, oversaw not just her household, but the royal treasury, negotiating trade agreements and funding military campaigns. These tasks were exhausting, yet queens had to perform them flawlessly, their competence a reflection of their husbands or their own authority. A mismanaged feast or a delayed payment could weaken alliances, turning a domestic task into a diplomatic crisis. The physical toll of queenship was immense. The heavy gowns, often layered with furs and jewels, caused chronic pain, particularly in the back and shoulders. Corsets and tight lacing restricted breathing, sometimes leading to fainting spells or long-term health issues. The relentless scheduled dawn prayers, hours of court duties, evening banquets left little time for rest. Queens like Philippa of Hainault, wife of Edward III of England, were known for their stamina, yet even they suffered from the strain of constant public life. Philippa, who traveled with her husband's court and bore 12 children, often hid physical exhaustion behind a serene facade, her health worn down by the demands of her role. Poor sanitation, drafty castles, and contaminated food added further risks, with illnesses like dysentery or infections a constant threat, even for royalty. The psychological strain was no less daunting. Queens had to maintain an image of perfection, pious, gracious, composed, while navigating a court filled with intrigue. Every noble was a potential rival, every advisor a possible spy. Friendships were dangerous. Even ladies-in-waiting could be informants for rival factions. For Margaret of Anjou, queen during England's Wars of the Roses, the court was a battleground of loyalties, her every decision scrutinized by nobles who doubted her foreign origins. The need to suppress emotions, to hide fear or frustration, took a toll. Queens learned to mask their true feelings, their smiles a shield against a world that watched for weakness. Yet, within this grind, queens found moments of agency. They used their public roles to build alliances, offering patronage to artists or clergy to strengthen their position. Eleanor of Aquitaine, for instance, turned her daily court appearances into opportunities to promote troubadour poetry, shaping a cultural legacy that outlasted her reign. They also wielded influence through subtle gestures, a kind word to a wavering noble, a gift to a bishop, a carefully timed absence from a banquet. These small acts, woven into the daily routine, allowed queens to shape their world without openly defying the constraints of their role. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Matilda or Blanche, moving through her day. She rises before dawn, her breath visible in the chilly air, as attendants drape her in heavy silks. She kneels in prayer, her knees aching on the cold chapel floor, aware of the eyes watching her devotion. She presides over breakfast, her every bite a performance, then spends hours hearing petitioners, her mind racing to balance justice with politics. Her gown chafes, her shoulders ache, yet she smiles, knowing a single frown could spark rumors. This was the daily grind of queenship, not a life of leisure, but a marathon of endurance, where every moment tested her strength and cunning. As we linger in this world, picture the queen retiring to her chamber, only to find no true rest, her attendants still hovering, her duties unfinished. Her life was a tapestry of rituals, each thread woven with purpose, each moment a chance to shape or shatter her kingdom. What did it mean to face this grind day after day, knowing the greatest test was not just survival, but the pressure to produce the heirs that would secure her legacy? Let's step into that world now, exploring the intense expectations of motherhood, the dangers of childbirth, and the emotional weight of a queen's most vital role. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, imagine a stone-walled chamber bathed in the soft glow of dawn, the air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and the faint rustle of silk. A bell tolls in the distance, calling the castle to morning prayers, pulling us deeper into the lives of these extraordinary women. Whether you re-listening from a tranquil village where the night feels endless, or a vibrant city where the day is just stirring, I'm so glad you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below. And let me know how these stories of the past touch your heart or spark your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. There are countless more tales waiting to unfold, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we stepped into the daily grind of queenship, where every moment was a performance, from dawn prayers to court duties, under the relentless gaze of a watchful court. We saw how queens like Matilda of England and Blanche of Castile navigated exhausting rituals and political intrigue. There lives a delicate balance of power and restraint. Now, we turn to one of the most defining pressures of their role, the expectation to produce heirs. This is part 3 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we explore the biological imperative that shaped their lives, the intense scrutiny of their fertility, the dangers of childbirth, the psychological strain of constant pregnancies, and the rare moments when queens turned this pressure into political leverage. Their bodies were not just their own. They were vessels for dynasties, and the stakes could not have been higher. Picture a queen, perhaps Catherine of Aragon, standing in her private chapel in the early 16th century, her hands clasped in prayer, her heart heavy with hope and fear. The weight of her crown feels lighter than the weight of expectation pressing upon her. At 24, she's already endured multiple pregnancies, each one a public event watched by the entire court. Her duty is clear: to produce a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Every month, her health, her cycles, her diet are scrutinized by physicians, midwives, and courtiers, their whispers trailing her like shadows. Failure to bear a son could mean more than personal disappointment. It could unravel alliances, destabilize the kingdom, or cost her marriage. This was the reality for medieval queens, where fertility was not just a private matter, but a cornerstone of political stability. The pressure to produce heirs was relentless, rooted in the medieval obsession with dynastic continuity. A king's legitimacy rested on his bloodline, and a queen's primary role was to ensure its survival through sons. Daughters, while valuable for alliances, were rarely enough. A queen who failed to produce a male heir risked being seen as cursed, inadequate, or even a threat to the realm. Catherine of Aragon, married to Henry VIII of England, faced this pressure acutely. Her first pregnancy in 1510 ended in a stillbirth, a devastating loss that set the tone for years of scrutiny. By 1516, after multiple miscarriages and the birth of a daughter, Mary, the court's whispers grew louder. Henry's impatience, fueled by the lack of a son, eventually led to their marriage's annulment, a stark reminder of how precarious a queen's position could be. Childbirth itself was a perilous ordeal. In an era before modern obstetrics, maternal and infant mortality rates were staggeringly high. Queens, despite their wealth, faced the same risks as common women hemorrhage, infection, or complications from prolonged labor. Medical knowledge was limited, often rooted in superstition or outdated theories. Midwives relied on herbal concoctions, prayers, and crude tools, while physicians, usually men with little practical experience, offered treatments like bloodletting that could do more harm than good. Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's third wife, gave birth to the long-awaited male heir, Edward VI, in 1537, but died days later from puerperal fever, a common postpartum infection. Her death at just 28 was a grim testament to the dangers queens faced in fulfilling their primary duty. The physical toll of repeated pregnancies was immense. Queens were expected to bear children as often as possible, sometimes annually, to secure the succession and provide spares in case of early deaths. Isabella of Castile, Queen of Spain in the late 15th century, bore 5 children, enduring constant pregnancies while managing a kingdom and funding Columbus's voyages. Each pregnancy weakened her body, yet she had to maintain a public image of strength and piety. The restrictive clothing of the time-tight corsets, heavy gowns exacerbated the strain, compressing organs and complicating deliveries. Queens often faced chronic pain, exhaustion, and long-term health issues, their bodies sacrificed to the demands of dynasty. The psychological strain was no less crushing. The court's obsession with the queen's fertility turned her body into a public spectacle. Every pregnancy was announced, celebrated, and watched, with courtiers betting on the outcome. A miscarriage or stillbirth wasn't just a personal loss. It was a political failure, fodder for gossip and intrigue. Catherine of Aragon's repeated losses, 5 of her 6 pregnancies ended in miscarriage or early death, brought not just grief but humiliation as her husband and court questioned her worth. The pressure to conceive again immediately after loss left little time for recovery or mourning. Queens had to hide their sorrow, presenting a serene facade while their hearts broke in private. Yet some queens turned this pressure into power. Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose life we touched on in part 1, used her fertility strategically. After her marriage to Louis VII of France produced only daughters. Leading to its annulment in 1152, she swiftly married Henry II of England. With Henry, she bore 8 children, including 5 sons, securing her position and influence in the English court. Her fertility became a political weapon, strengthening her claim to power and ensuring her legacy through her sons like Richard the Lionheart and John. Eleanor's ability to navigate this pressure shows how queens could wield agency even within the confines of their role. The expectation of fertility wasn't just about producing children. It was about producing the right children's sons who could inherit, marry, and extend the dynasty. This placed queens in a delicate position, especially if their husbands were infertile or disinterested. Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, faced this starkly. Married in 1533, she bore a daughter, Elizabeth, but no sons. Her failure to produce a male heir, combined with Henry's waning affection, led to accusations of adultery and treason. Her execution in 1536 was a brutal reminder that a queen's fertility was tied to her survival. The court's narrative painted her as a schemer, but the truth was simpler. She couldn't meet an impossible standard in a world that judged her worth by her womb. Religious expectations added another layer of pressure. Queens were seen as vessels of divine will, their fertility a sign of God's favor. Failure to conceive was sometimes interpreted as punishment for sin, either the queen's or the kingdom's. This belief could turn personal struggles into public crises. Margaret of Anjou, queen during England's Wars of the Roses, faced such accusations when she took 8 years to produce a son. Edward, in 1453, rumors swirled that the child wasn't her husband's, fueled by political enemies who used her delayed fertility to undermine her. The Church, a powerful force, often reinforced these judgments, urging queens to pray harder, fast, or undertake pilgrimages to correct their failings. The emotional isolation of this role was profound. Queens couldn't confide in friends, as most companions were courtiers with their own agendas. Even their children, once born, were often taken from them, raised by wet nurses and tutors to prepare them for their own political roles. Eleanor of Aquitaine, despite her many children, saw them used as pawns in marriage alliances, sent to foreign courts while she navigated her own political battles. The bond between mother and child was secondary to the needs of the dynasty, leaving queens to grieve their losses, whether through miscarriage or distance and silence. The court's obsession with heirs also shaped a queen's daily life. Her diet, exercise, and even sleep were monitored, with physicians prescribing bizarre remedies to boost fertility, from herbal tonics to amulets. Some, like drinking Mari's milk or wearing charms, were harmless but useless. Others, like mercury-based concoctions, were toxic. Queens like Isabella of Castile endured these treatments, balancing hope and skepticism, knowing their health was secondary to the kingdom's needs. The constant pregnancies, combined with poor medical care, aged queens prematurely, their bodies worn out by their 20s or 30s. Yet, they had to maintain an image of vitality, their exhaustion hidden behind jeweled crowns and serene smiles. For foreign queens, the pressure was even greater. Women like Catherine of Aragon or Margaret of Anjou, married to seal alliances, were often seen as outsiders. Their failure to produce heirs could be weaponized by rivals, who accused them of disloyalty or infertility tied to their foreign nature. Catherine, a Spanish princess, faced this in England, where her losses were contrasted with her husband's English mistresses, as if her heritage were to blame. These queens had to navigate not just their husbands' courts, but the prejudices of a new land, their fertility a test of their worth in a hostile environment. Despite these challenges, some queens found ways to assert agency through motherhood. Isabella of Castile, for example, used her children's marriages to forge alliances across Europe, creating a network of power that strengthened Spain's position. Her daughter, Catherine, was married to England's Arthur, then Henry VIII, linking Spain to England's throne. This strategic use of motherhood allowed queens to shape dynasties, even as they risked their lives to build them. Their resilience in the face of such pressure is a testament to their strength, not just as mothers, but as political figures. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Catherine or Jane, lying in a canopied bed after another grueling pregnancy, her body aching, her heart torn between hope and fear. The court waits outside, eager for news of a son, their whispers a constant hum. She knows her worth is measured by this moment, yet she faces it with courage, her pain hidden behind a regal facade. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a crucible where body and soul were tested. The pressure to produce heirs was more than a duty. It was a battle for survival fought in the most intimate corners of their lives. As we linger in this world, picture the queen rising from her bed, her strength renewed despite the toll, ready to face the court once more. Her life was not just about heirs, but about the marriages that bound her to this royal alliances forged not in love, but in politics, where every vow carried the weight of kingdoms. Let's step into that world now, exploring the realities of royal marriage, the emotional isolation, and the risks of seeking love in a world that punished deviation. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, imagine a grand hall lit by flickering torches, their golden light dancing across tapestries woven with tales of valor and faith. The air hums with the murmur of courtiers, the clink of goblets, and the distant strum of a lute. A young queen stands at the center, her gown heavy with jewels, her expression serene yet guarded. Whether you re-listening from a quiet village where the night wraps you in stillness, or a bustling city where the day is just awakening, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and let me know how these stories of the past stir your thoughts or soothe your heart. If these gentle journeys through history spark your curiosity or bring a moment of calm, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past are waiting to share their tales, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we explored the crushing pressure on queens to produce heirs, where their bodies became battlegrounds for dynastic survival, their every pregnancy a matter of state. We saw how women like Catherine of Aragon and Eleanor of Aquitaine faced perilous childbirths and relentless scrutiny, yet found ways to wield influence through motherhood. Now, we turn to the heart of their roles, marriage. This is part 4 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we delve into the realities of royal marriages, arranged unions forged in politics, not love, the emotional isolation they brought, the dangers of seeking romance outside their bounds, and the challenges of widowhood. For queens, marriage was a contract, a stage, and often a cage where every vow carried the weight of kingdoms. Picture a young girl, barely 12, standing before a vast altar in a cathedral draped in silk and gold. Her betrothed, a man she's never met, perhaps twice her age, stands beside her, his face a mask of duty. The air is thick with incense, the chants of priests echoing off stone walls. This is no love story. It's a treaty sealed with her hand. Isabella of Valois, married at just 6 to Richard II of England in 1396, was one such bride. Her marriage was meant to secure peace between England and France during the 100 Years' War. But she was a child, sent to a foreign court where she spoke little of the language and knew no one. Her role was to be a symbol of unity, her feelings irrelevant. This was the reality for medieval queens. Marriage was a tool of diplomacy, not a union of hearts. Arranged marriages were the cornerstone of medieval politics. Kings and nobles used them to forge alliances, end wars, or expand territories. Queens were pawns in this game, their futures decided by fathers or guardians, often before they could walk. A queen's consent was rarely sought. Her role was to obey, to embody grace, and to strengthen her husband's dynasty. Margaret of Anjou, married to Henry VI of England in 1445 at 15, was another such bride. Her union was meant to cement a truce with France, but she arrived in a court rife with factionalism, her French origins making her a target of suspicion. She was expected to love and honor a husband she barely knew, a man whose mental instability left her to navigate England's turbulent politics alone. The emotional isolation of these marriages was profound. Queens were often foreigners in their new courts, surrounded by strangers who viewed them with skepticism. Language barriers, cultural differences, and political rivalries made trust rare. Margaret of Anjou, for instance, struggled to connect with her husband, Henry VI, whose piety and fragile mental state left little room for companionship. She was expected to be a devoted wife, yet her role as queen demanded she act as a political partner even when her husband faltered. The court watched her every move, ready to pounce on any sign of disloyalty or weakness. Friendships were dangerous. Ladies-in-waiting, often appointed by rival nobles, could be spies, reporting back to factions eager to undermine her. Love, as we understand it, was a luxury queens could rarely afford. The romantic ideals of courtly love celebrated in poetry and song were a fantasy, not a reality. These tales, popularized by figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine and her patronage of troubadours, spoke of knights adoring noble ladies from afar, their love pure and unattainable. But for queens, such notions were perilous. Seeking love outside marriage, even a fleeting connection, risked accusations of adultery or treason, crimes that could lead to imprisonment or death. Eleanor herself faced such dangers. During her marriage to Louis VII of France, rumors swirled about her closeness to her uncle, Raymond of Poitiers, during the Second Crusade. Though likely unfounded, these whispers fueled her enemies' narratives, leading to her eventual annulment and years of confinement later in life under Henry II. Eleanor's story highlights the risks of defying marital expectations. After her annulment from Louis VII in 1152, she married Henry II of England, a union that brought her vast Aquitanian lands to his crown. But their marriage, though initially passionate, soured over time. Eleanor's independence and political acumen clashed with Henry's desire for control, and her rumored involvement with courtiers again, likely exaggerated, led to her imprisonment for 16 years after she supported her son's rebellion against their father in 1173. Her punishment was a stark warning. A queen who stepped outside the bounds of loyalty, even in perception, faced severe consequences. Adultery, real or fabricated, was a weapon used to discredit queens, as it was later for Anne Boleyn, whose alleged affairs led to her execution in 1536. The expectation to love and obey a husband, regardless of his actions, was a heavy burden. Many queens married men who were poor matches older, disinterested, or cruel. Isabella of France, married to Edward II of England in 1308, faced a husband whose favoritism toward male courtiers, like Piers Gaveston, humiliated her and destabilized the court. She was expected to remain loyal, to bear heirs, and to maintain a facade of harmony, even as Edward's neglect fueled her isolation. Yet, Isabella found ways to assert agency, eventually orchestrating a rebellion with her lover, Roger Mortimer, to depose Edward in 1327. Her actions, while successful, earned her the nickname She-Wolf, a reminder that queens who defied marital norms were vilified, their reputations shaped by male chroniclers. Widowhood brought its own challenges. A queen who outlived her husband faced a precarious future. Some, like Eleanor of Aquitaine, used widowhood to reclaim power. After Henry II's death in 1189, Eleanor governed as regent for her son Richard the Lionheart, wielding influence she'd been denied during her imprisonment. But others faced forced remarriages or marginalization. Isabella of Valois, widowed at 10 when Richard II was deposed, was sent back to France, her youth and lack of heirs making her a political liability. Widowed queens were often pressured to remarry to secure new alliances, their autonomy curtailed by the same forces that shaped their first marriages. Those who resisted, like Margaret of Anjou after Henry VI's death, faced exile or obscurity, their power tied to their husbands' thrones. The lack of agency in marriage extended to the bedchamber. Queens were expected to be available to their husbands, their bodies a tool for producing heirs. Consent was rarely considered. Refusal could be seen as defiance, risking accusations of disloyalty. The public nature of royal intimacy attendants often present, even during conception stripped queens of privacy. Births were witnessed by courtiers to ensure legitimacy, adding to the humiliation. For queens like Catherine of Aragon, whose multiple pregnancies were scrutinized by Henry VIII's court, this lack of privacy turned personal moments into political spectacles, her failures fodder for gossip. Yet some queens found subtle ways to navigate these constraints. They used their roles as wives to build alliances, offering patronage or kindness to sway nobles. Eleanor of Aquitaine, during her time as Queen of England, cultivated a court that drew poets and scholars, using her charm to strengthen her position, even when her marriage faltered. Others, like Isabella of Castile, used their marriages to forge dynastic networks. Isabella's union with Ferdinand of Aragon united Spain, and her careful diplomacy as a wife ensured their joint rule was a partnership, not a subordination. These queens turned the cage of marriage into a platform, their influence woven through subtle acts of persuasion. The emotional toll of these marriages was immense. Queens were expected to suppress their desires, their fears, their loneliness, presenting a facade of devotion. Margaret of Anjou, isolated in a hostile English court, channeled her energies into protecting her son, Edward, during the Wars of the Roses, but her letters reveal a woman aching for connection, her loyalty to a frail husband, a source of both strength and sorrow. The courtly ideal of love, sung by troubadours, was a cruel mirage for queens, who faced suspicion for even the hint of affection outside their marriage. Their hearts were as bound as their futures, their personal desires sacrificed for the good of the realm. Religion offered both solace and pressure. Queens were expected to embody Christian virtue, their fidelity a reflection of divine order. The Church, a powerful force, preached obedience, and any deviation, real or rumored, could lead to accusations of sin. Catherine of Aragon, devoutly Catholic, clung to her faith as her marriage to Henry VIII crumbled. Her refusal to accept annulment rooted in her belief that her vows were sacred. Yet her piety couldn't shield her from Henry's determination to remarry, a reminder that even faith was subject to political needs. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Isabella or Eleanor, standing at a banquet, her husband at her side, yet a chasm of duty between them. Her smile is perfect, her gown a cascade of silk, but her heart is a locked chamber, her dreams of love buried beneath the weight of her crown. This was the reality of royal marriage, not a romance, but a contract, where every vow was a thread in the tapestry of power. The isolation, the danger, the rare moments of agency shaped these women, their lives a testament to resilience in a world that demanded everything. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from the banquet hall, her mind already turning to the court she must navigate. Marriage was just one facet of her role. Beyond it lay a battlefield of intrigue, where every gesture, every alliance, was a chance to wield power. Let's step into that world now, exploring the political maneuvering and soft power that allowed queens to shape their kingdoms, even within the constraints of their gilded cages. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a grand hall aglow with torchlight, where shadows flicker across stone walls adorned with vibrant tapestries. The air hums with the clink of goblets, the murmur of courtiers, and the faint strains of a minstrel's lute. A queen stands at the heart of it all, her jeweled gown catching the light, her expression calm yet calculating. Whether you re-listening from a quiet village where the night wraps you in peace, or a lively city where the morning is just stirring, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and let me know how these stories of the past spark your thoughts or soothe your soul. If these gentle journeys through history bring you wonder or calm, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past await, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we explored the stark realities of royal marriage arranged unions forged in politics, not love, where queens like Isabella of France and Eleanor of Aquitaine faced emotional isolation, the dangers of seeking romance, and the challenges of widowhood. Their marriages were contracts, binding them to kingdoms and duties that shaped their lives. Now, we turn to how these women wielded influence within these constraints. This is part 5 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we delve into the art of political maneuvering and soft power, the subtle, strategic ways queens navigated court intrigue, built alliances, and shaped their kingdoms, all while maintaining the delicate facade of feminine virtue. Their power was not in crowns or decrees, but in the quiet mastery of a treacherous world. Picture a queen, perhaps Eleanor of Aquitaine, seated at a long oak table in a candlelit chamber, surrounded by nobles whose smiles hide ambition. Every word she speaks, every gesture she makes, is a calculated move in a game where one misstep could unravel her influence. The medieval court was a labyrinth of loyalties and rivalries, where power shifted like sand underfoot. Queens, denied the formal authority of kings, had to wield influence indirectly through suggestion, patronage, and relationships. This soft power was their greatest weapon, allowing them to shape policy and secure their positions without openly challenging the male-dominated world they inhabited. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a master of this art. As Queen of France, then England, in the 12th century, she transformed her courts into cultural and political hubs. Her patronage of troubadours and poets spread the ideals of courtly love, not just as romantic fantasy, but as a tool to elevate her status. By fostering a vibrant court culture, she drew loyalty from nobles and clergy, strengthening her influence. When her marriage to Louis VII faltered, she used her Aquitanian wealth and charisma to secure a new alliance with Henry II of England, bringing her vast duchy to his crown. Later, as regent for her son Richard the Lionheart, she governed England with a deft hand, negotiating with rebellious barons and maintaining stability while he was on crusade. Her power lay not in commands, but in her ability to persuade, to charm, to outmaneuver. This political education was rarely formal. Unlike kings who might study law or military strategy, queens were taught feminine skills, embroidery, music, or basic literacy in Latin. Their knowledge of statcraft came from observation, from listening to advisors, or from watching their husbands' courts. Blanche of Castile, who ruled France as regent for her son Louis IX in the 13th century, had no formal training, yet she mastered the art of governance. She learned by watching her husband Louis VIII and his advisors, absorbing the nuances of diplomacy and finance. As regent, she quelled rebellions, negotiated treaties, and managed the royal treasury, all while maintaining an image of pious humility. Her success came from her ability to read the court, to know when to act and when to defer, a skill honed through years of silent study. Court intrigue was a daily challenge. Every seating arrangement, every invitation to a feast, every gift bestowed was a political act. A queen had to navigate noble factions, each vying for power, without appearing to favor one too strongly. A misstep, inviting the wrong lord to dine or overlooking a bishop's request, could spark resentment or rebellion. Matilda of England, during her fight for the throne in the 1140s, faced this constantly. Her claim to England's crown was contested by her cousin Stephen, and every decision she made, from granting land to hosting banquets, was a chance to win or lose allies. Her blunt style sometimes alienated nobles, who accused her of unwomanly arrogance, but her persistence kept her cause alive, proving that even in failure, a queen's maneuvering could shape history. Religious patronage was a key tool of soft power. Queens founded monasteries, donated to churches, and supported clergy, building alliances with the church, a dominant force in medieval politics. By funding a new abbey or gifting land to a bishop, a queen could secure loyalty from religious leaders whose influence rivaled that of nobles. Eleanor of Aquitaine, for example, endowed monasteries in both France and England, earning favor with the church that protected her during political crises. Similarly, Isabella of Castile in the late 15th century used her piety to strengthen Spain's unity, funding religious reforms that aligned the church with her vision of a centralized kingdom. These acts were not just devotional. They were strategic, cementing a queen's legitimacy in a world quick to question her authority. The constraints of queenship made this maneuvering a delicate balancing act. A queen had to appear submissive, embodying the feminine ideals of modesty and obedience, even as she wielded influence. If she was too assertive, she risked accusations of overstepping her role, as Matilda did when she demanded loyalty from nobles during England's Civil War. If she was too passive, she could be sidelined, her influence ignored. Blanche of Castile struck this balance masterfully, presenting herself as a devoted mother and widow while ruling France with an iron will. Her letters to allies were couched in humble language, yet her actions raising armies, negotiating with rebels spoke of unshakable resolve. This duality was the essence of soft power, to lead without seeming to lead. The court was a pressure cooker where every interaction was a test. Nobles watched for signs of weakness, ready to exploit any mistake. A queen's choice of whom to favor, a knight, a poet, a cleric, could shift alliances or spark jealousy. Margaret of Anjou, queen during England's Wars of the Roses in the 15th century, navigated this treacherous landscape. As her husband, Henry VI, descended into mental instability, she became the de facto leader of the Lancastrian cause. Her patronage of loyal nobles and her diplomatic outreach to France kept her faction alive, but her assertiveness drew criticism. Chroniclers called her unwomanly, a reminder that a queen's power was always under scrutiny, her influence a tightrope walk between strength and submission. Diplomacy was another arena where queens wielded soft power. As wives and mothers, they were often mediators, smoothing tensions between kingdoms or factions. Isabella of France, married to Edward II of England, used her position to negotiate peace with France during her early years as queen. Later, when Edward's rule faltered, she leveraged her French connections to orchestrate his deposition in 1327, ruling as regent for her son, Edward III. Her actions, though bold, were cloaked in the language of maternal duty, allowing her to wield power without openly defying societal norms. This ability to act through others, husbands, sons, or allies, was a hallmark of Queen's political maneuvering. The emotional toll of this life was immense. Queens had to suppress their fears, their frustrations, their ambitions, presenting a facade of calm. Trust was a luxury. Even allies could turn, and ladies-in-waiting often reported to rival factions. Eleanor of Aquitaine's imprisonment by Henry II, sparked by her support for her son's rebellion, showed the risks of political miscalculation. For 16 years, she was confined, her influence curtailed, yet even in captivity, she maintained a network of supporters, proving her resilience. The constant need to anticipate, to strategize, to hide one's true self wore on queens, their minds as taxed as their bodies. Patronage extended beyond the church to the arts and culture, another avenue for influence. Queens like Eleanor commissioned manuscripts and poetry, shaping the cultural narrative of their reigns. By fostering troubadours, she not only enriched her court, but created a legacy that influenced European literature. Similarly, Philippa of Hainault, wife of Edward III, supported artists and merchants, strengthening England's economy and her own reputation as a benevolent queen. These acts were not mere generosity. They were investments in loyalty, ensuring that bards and bishops alike sang her praises. The physical setting of the court amplified these challenges. Castles were cold, drafty, and often cramped. with nobles and servants packed into shared spaces. A queen's chamber, though grand, was never truly private, her every conversation overheard by attendants. Banquets, hunts, and ceremonies were stages for her performance, where a misplaced word or a poorly timed laugh could shift alliances. Matilda of England learned this during her struggle for the throne, when her stern demeanor at court alienated potential supporters. Yet she adapted, learning to soften her approach, offering gifts and kindness to win back favor. This adaptability was key to a queen's survival, her ability to read the room, a skill honed through years of vigilance. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Blanche or Eleanor, moving through a crowded hall, her gown trailing behind her, her smile a carefully crafted mask. She greets a bishop with deference, offers a poet a commission, and sidesteps a noble's veiled barb, all while calculating her next move. Her power lies not in decrees, but in the subtle threads she weaves alliances, patronage, whispered counsel. This was the art of queenship, to shape a kingdom from the shadows, to wield influence in a world that demanded her submission. The court was her battlefield, her mind her weapon, her every act a testament to her resilience. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from the hall, her body weary from the weight of her gown, her mind racing with the day's intrigues. Beyond the court's maneuvering lay physical challenges, health risks, toxic remedies, and environments that tested her endurance. Let's step into that world now, exploring the medical dangers, the harsh realities of castle life, and the toll of living under constant scrutiny. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a stone-walled chamber where the flicker of candlelight battles the early morning chill. The air carries the faint scent of damp earth and burning herbs, and a queen, draped in heavy silks, prepares for another day under the weight of her crown. Whether you read listening from a quiet village where dawn paints the sky in soft hues, or a bustling city where the morning hums with life, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I'd love to hear where you rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below. And let me know how these stories of the past stir your heart or spark your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past are waiting to share their tales, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we explored the intricate art of political maneuvering, where queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine and Blanche of Castile wielded soft power through patronage, diplomacy, and subtle influence, navigating a court rife with intrigue. Their minds were their greatest tools, shaping kingdoms while maintaining the facade of feminine virtue. Now we turn to the physical realities of their lives, the unseen battles they fought against their own bodies and environments. This is part 6 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we delve into the health and physical challenges queens faced: primitive medicine, hazardous environments, toxic cosmetics, and the psychological toll of living in a world that demanded perfection while endangering their well-being. Their resilience in the face of these trials reveals the true cost of the crown. Picture a queen, perhaps Philippa of Hainault, standing in her chamber as dawn breaks over a 14th century English castle. Her breath is visible in the cold air, her heavy gown pulling at her shoulders. She's 30 but feels older, her body worn by multiple pregnancies and the relentless demands of court life. A physician, clad in dark robes, offers her a vial of murky liquid mercury and herbs, he claims, to cure her lingering cough. She hesitates, knowing such remedies often sicken more than heal, but her role demands she appear strong, her ailments hidden from a court eager for signs of weakness. This was the reality for medieval queens. Their health was not just personal but political, their bodies as much a stage as their thrones. Medicine in the Middle Ages was a mix of superstition, ancient texts, and trial and error. often doing more harm than good. Physicians relied on humoral theory, believing illness stemmed from imbalances in bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Treatments like bloodletting, where leeches or lancets drained excess blood, were common even for queens. Isabella of France, wife of Edward II, endured such treatments for recurring fevers in the early 14th century. Her body weakened by repeated sessions that left her faint and vulnerable to infection. Herbal concoctions, often laced with toxic substances like lead or arsenic, were prescribed for everything from headaches to infertility, with little understanding of their dangers. For queens, refusing treatment was difficult. A sick queen was a liability, her frailty a threat to the dynasty's stability. Childbirth, as we saw in Part 3, was a leading cause of death, but its toll extended beyond the delivery room. Repeated pregnancies, often yearly, ravaged queens' bodies. Isabella of Castile, who bore 5 children in the late 15th century, suffered chronic pain and exhaustion, her health eroded by the strain of childbirth and the heavy, restrictive clothing required of her station. Corsets designed to project an image of grace, compressed organs, and restricted breathing, exacerbating complications during pregnancy and recovery. Queens like Jane Seymour, who died in 1537 after giving birth to Edward VI, faced infections like puerperal fever, untreatable in an era before antibiotics. Even those who survived, like Eleanor of Aquitaine with her 8 children, carried scars, physical and emotional, from the ordeal. The environments queens inhabited were as hazardous as the medicine. Castles, though grand, were cold, damp, and poorly ventilated. Mold crept up stone walls, and smoky fires filled rooms with soot, aggravating respiratory issues. Berengaria of Navarre, wife of Richard the Lionheart, fell ill repeatedly during her time in 12th century England, likely from the damp conditions of castles like Winchester, where drafts and poor sanitation were constant threats. Food, even for royalty, was often contaminated spoiled meat, tainted water, or bread laced with ergot, a fungus causing hallucinations or convulsions. Dental decay was rampant, with no modern dentistry. Queens like Philippa of Hainault endured toothaches, their pain hidden behind smiles at court banquets. Cosmetics, a necessity for queens to maintain an image of divine beauty, were another hidden danger. Lead-based powders, used to whiten skin, poison the body over time, causing hair loss, skin lesions, and organ damage. Elizabeth I, though a later example, suffered from lead poisoning in the 16th century, her iconic pale complexion a product of toxic ceruse that likely contributed to her declining health. Medieval queens faced similar risks. Their elaborate hairstyles, pinned with metal combs or dusted with lead powders, caused scalp infections or chronic headaches. Heavy gowns, layered with furs and jewels, restricted movement and strained spines, while tight lacing led to fainting spells or long-term damage to ribs and lungs. The psychological toll of these physical challenges was profound. Queens had to hide illness or pain, as any sign of weakness could fuel court intrigue or weaken their husband's rule. Margaret of Anjou, queen during England's Wars of the Roses, battled chronic fatigue, an illness in the 15th century, yet maintained a fierce public persona to lead her faction. The constant need to appear healthy, fertile, and composed took a mental toll, with no outlet for complaint. Depression and anxiety, poorly understood, were often misdiagnosed as spiritual failings or possession, leading to treatments like exorcisms or fasting that further weakened the body. Joanna of Castile, later dubbed the Mad, suffered from what may have been postpartum depression after multiple pregnancies, but her grief was labeled insanity, justifying her confinement by her own son. The court's relentless scrutiny amplified these challenges. Every cough, every absence from a banquet, was noted by courtiers eager for gossip. A queen's health was a matter of state, her body a symbol of the kingdom's vitality. If she fell ill, rumors of divine punishment or poisoning spread, as they did for Anne of Bohemia, wife of Richard II, who died of plague in 1394 at 28. Her death, though natural, sparked whispers of foul play, a reminder that a queen's health was never private. Even minor ailments like a fever or a sprain had to be concealed, forcing queens to endure pain in silence while performing their duties. The lack of privacy extended to medical care. Physicians and midwives, often male, examined queens in the presence of attendants, their diagnoses debated publicly. Treatments were performed before an audience, with courtiers noting every grimace or complaint. For queens like Isabella of France, this public scrutiny added humiliation to physical suffering, as her treatments for fevers were discussed as if they were state policy. The castle itself, with its crowded halls and shared chambers, offered no respite. Servants slept near the queen's bed, and even her most intimate moments bathing, dressing, or resting were witnessed, leaving no space for vulnerability. Yet queens found ways to cope. Some turned to religion, praying for strength or healing, their piety a shield against accusations of weakness. Eleanor of Aquitaine endowed hospitals and infirmaries, perhaps seeking divine favor for her health and her children's. Others relied on herbal knowledge learned from midwives or nuns to counter toxic remedies. Philippa of Hainault, known for her compassion, supported apothecaries who experimented with safer treatments, though even these were limited by the era's ignorance. These small acts of agency, choosing a trusted healer, funding a hospital, allowed queens to reclaim some control over their bodies, even as they faced relentless risks. The physical demands of queenship extended to their public roles. Travel, a necessity for royal duties, was grueling. Queens like Berengarie accompanied their husbands on campaigns or diplomatic missions, riding for days in jolting litters or on horseback, their heavy gowns soaking up dust or rain. Poor roads, bandit threats, and exposure to disease made these journeys perilous. Philippa of Hainault, who traveled across England and France with Edward III, faced storms, shipwrecks, and outbreaks of plague, her health strained by the constant movement. Yet she had to appear radiant at every stop, her exhaustion hidden to maintain the crown's prestige. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Isabella or Philippa, sitting in a drafty chamber as a physician applies a leech to her arm, her face composed despite the sting. Her gown chafes, her head aches from lead-lace powder, yet she must rise for a banquet, her smile a mask for the court's watchful eyes. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a crucible where health was sacrificed for duty. The physical challenges, from toxic remedies to damp castles, tested their endurance, their resilience a silent triumph in a world that demanded perfection. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from her chamber, her body weary but her resolve unbroken, ready to face the court's relentless scrutiny. Beyond the physical toll lay a deeper pressure, the court as a pressure cooker, where every word, every glance, was a test of loyalty and strength. Let's step into that world now, exploring the suffocating expectations, the divided loyalties, and the emotional isolation that defined a queen's life in the heart of power. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, picture a vast hall bathed in the golden flicker of torchlight, where the clatter of silver goblets mingles with the low hum of whispered alliances. The air is thick with the scent of spiced wine and burning wax, and a queen stands poised at the center, her jeweled crown glinting, her expression a careful blend of grace and vigilance. Whether you're re-listening from a quiet village where the night wraps you in stillness, or a bustling city where the morning stirs with life, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I'd love to hear where you read joining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and let me know how these stories of the past touch your heart or spark your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past await, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we explored the health and physical challenges queens face, primitive medicine, toxic cosmetics, damp castles, and the relentless toll of childbirth, all endured under the watchful eyes of the court. Women like Philippa of Hainault and Isabella of Castile battled their bodies' frailties while maintaining an image of strength, their resilience a silent victory. Now we step deeper into the heart of their world, the court itself. This is part 7 of our 12-part series, Boring History, what life was really like for medieval queens. Today, we delve into the court as a pressure cooker, a crucible of constant scrutiny, divided loyalties, restricted education, and emotional isolation, where every gesture carried the weight of a kingdom, and trust was a luxury few could afford. Imagine a queen, perhaps Eleanor of Aquitaine, moving through a crowded hall in the 12th century, her silk gown trailing across the stone floor. Nobles bow as she passes, but their eyes linger, searching for signs of weakness or intent. Every word she speaks, every smile she offers, is dissected for political meaning. A misplaced glance could spark rumors of favoritism. A moment of frustration could be twisted into a conspiracy. The court was not just a stage, but a battlefield, where queens had to navigate a web of intrigue with no room for error. Eleanor, known for her sharp wit, faced this pressure acutely during her time as Queen of France and later England. Her bold demeanor drew admiration, but also suspicion, culminating in her imprisonment by Henry II after she supported her son's rebellion in 1173. Her story shows how the court could turn even the most powerful queen into a target. This constant scrutiny defined a queen's existence. Every aspect of her life, her dress, her speech, her choice of companions, was a public performance. A single misstep could ignite scandal or rebellion. For Isabella of France, wife of Edward II of England in the early 14th century, the court's watchful eyes turned her into a scapegoat. Her husband's favoritism toward courtiers like Piers Gaveston fueled gossip, and her efforts to assert influence were branded as manipulative, earning her the nickname She-Wolf. Yet she had to maintain a facade of loyalty, her every action analyzed by nobles eager to undermine her. The court was a pressure cooker, where the heat of scrutiny never relented, and queens had to master the art of composure to survive. Divided loyalties were a constant challenge. Queens, especially those married to foreign kings, were often caught between their birth families and their new kingdoms. As outsiders, they faced suspicion from their husband's court, who saw them as potential spies or agents of their native lands. Margaret of Anjou, married to Henry VI of England in 1445, was a French princess in a court wary of her origins during the 100 Years' War. Her efforts to protect her son, Edward, and lead the Lancastrian cause during the Wars of the Roses made her a target for accusations of disloyalty. Every decision to favor an English noble or seek French aid was a tightrope walk, her loyalty questioned by both sides. This tension forced queens to navigate a delicate balance, their every alliance a potential spark for conflict. The lack of formal education added another layer of pressure. Unlike kings who were trained in law, theology, or military strategy, queens were taught feminine skills, embroidery, music, or basic literacy in Latin. Their political knowledge came from observation, from listening to advisors or watching their husbands' courts. Blanche of Castile, regent of France in the 13th century, had no formal training in governance, yet she ruled with precision, quelling rebellions and managing the royal treasury. Her education was forged in the crucible of the court, where she learned to read nobles' intentions, negotiate treaties, and wield authority while appearing deferential. This lack of preparation made every decision a gamble, where instinct and cunning were as vital as any book. Children, too, were sources of pressure rather than solace. Queens were expected to raise heirs as political assets, not just loved ones. Their sons and daughters were pawns in marriage alliances, sent to foreign courts at young ages. Eleanor of Aquitaine, mother to 8 children, saw her daughters married off to secure ties with Germany, Castile, and Sicily, their childhood sacrificed for diplomacy. Her sons, like Richard the Lionheart, were groomed for power, their upbringing overseen by tutors and advisors, not their mother. This distance strained maternal bonds, leaving queens to navigate their roles as mothers with limited emotional connection, their love tempered by the needs of the crown. The emotional isolation of the court was perhaps its heaviest burden. Trust was a rare commodity. Even ladies in waiting, who dressed and served the queen, were often loyal to rival factions. Friendships were risky, as any confidant could betray secrets to gain favor. Margaret of Anjou's letters reveal her loneliness, surrounded by courtiers yet unable to trust them as her husband's mental instability left her to lead alone. The need to suppress emotions, fear, anger, grief, was relentless. A queen's tears could be seen as weakness, her laughter as frivolity. She had to maintain a facade of serenity, her true self buried beneath layers of protocol, her heart a locked chamber in a world that demanded perfection. The court's physical environment amplified this pressure. Castles were crowded, with nobles, servants, and petitioners filling every hall. Privacy was non-existent. Even the queen's chamber was shared with attendants who slept nearby, their presence a constant reminder of her exposure. Banquets, where queens presided, were stages for intrigue, where seating arrangements and toasts were political acts. A queen who favored one noble over another risked alienating factions, as Matilda of England learned during her fight for the throne in the 1140s. Her blunt style sparked resentment, forcing her to adapt, offering gifts and soft words to win back support. Every interaction was a performance, every moment a test of her ability to navigate the court's shifting currents. Religion, a cornerstone of medieval life, added to the pressure. Queens were expected to embody Christian virtue, their piety a public display. Missing Mass or appearing distracted could fuel accusations of impiety, as it did for Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose vibrant personality clashed with the French court's expectations. Yet religion also offered leverage. Queens like Blanche used their patronage of monasteries to build alliances with the church, securing loyalty that bolstered their authority. These acts of piety were strategic, a way to navigate the court's pressures while reinforcing their legitimacy. The psychological toll of this life was immense. Constant vigilance, the need to anticipate betrayals, and the suppression of emotions led to anxiety and exhaustion. Queens like Margaret of Anjou, battling to preserve her son's claim during England's Civil War, showed signs of strain, her fierce leadership masking a private struggle. The court's scrutiny turned every decision into a potential crisis, where a single rumor could undo years of careful maneuvering. Yet, queens endured, their resilience forged in this pressure cooker, their ability to navigate its dangers a testament to their strength. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Blanche or Margaret, standing in the great hall, her smile unwavering as she greets a scheming noble. Her gown is heavy, her heart heavier, yet she moves with grace, her mind racing to counter every whispered plot. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a crucible where every moment tested her wit and endurance. The court was a world of shadows, where loyalty was fleeting and survival demanded constant vigilance. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from the hall, her composure intact but her spirit strained by the court's relentless gaze. Beyond the intrigue lay the public stage of queenship, where every appearance, every gesture, was a performance for a kingdom. Let's step into that world now, exploring the symbolic power of a queen's presence, the cost of maintaining a perfect facade, and the strategies that allowed her to shape her realm from the spotlight. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a grand hall where the glow of chandeliers casts intricate shadows across Polished stone floors, and the air hums with the scent of beeswax and the murmur of gathered nobles. A queen stands at the heart of this scene, her gown a cascade of silk and jewels, her posture flawless, her smile a crafted mask. Whether you're re-listening from a quiet village where dawn breaks softly, or a bustling city where the morning pulses with life, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and let me know how these stories of the past stir your heart or ignite your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past are waiting to share their tales, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we delved into the court as a pressure cooker, where queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine and Margaret of Anjou navigated constant scrutiny, divided loyalties, and emotional isolation. Their every gesture weighed for political meaning. Their lives were a relentless performance, their resilience forged in a crucible of intrigue. Now, we step onto the broader stage of their public lives. This is part 8 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we explore the public stage of queenship, the lack of privacy that turned every moment into a performance, the symbolic power of appearance, the soft power strategies that shaped policy, and the psychological cost of maintaining a perfect facade. For queens, the world was their audience, and every act was a delicate dance of power and perception. Picture a queen, perhaps Blanche of Castile, stepping into a cathedral for a coronation ceremony in 13th century France. The crowd parts, their eyes fixed on her as she moves, her crown glinting in the stained glass light. Every detail of her appearance, the gold embroidery on her mantle, the sapphire ring on her finger carries meaning, signaling wealth, piety, and authority. But this is no moment of ease. Attendants surround her, adjusting her veil, whispering instructions, their presence a reminder that she is never alone. Even this sacred moment is a performance, her every step choreographed for a kingdom watching her every move. This was the reality of queenship, a life lived on a public stage where privacy was a myth and every gesture was a statement. The lack of privacy defined a queen's existence. From the moment she woke, she was surrounded by attendants, ladies in waiting, chamberlains, scribes, who dressed her, served her, and recorded her actions. Her bedchamber, far from a sanctuary, was a hub of activity, with servants sleeping on pallets nearby, their eyes and ears ever present. Even intimate moments, bathing, eating, or resting, were witnessed, turning personal routines into public spectacles. For Eleanor of Aquitaine, this lack of solitude was a constant strain. During her time as Queen of France, her vibrant personality drew criticism from a court that expected demure silence, her every laugh or bold gesture fodder for gossip. The absence of privacy meant queens had to guard their emotions, their true selves hidden behind a regal mask. A queen's appearance was a powerful tool laden with symbolism. Her clothing, jewelry, and even hairstyle were chosen to convey messages of power, legitimacy, or allegiance. A misstep could spark diplomatic crises or courtly scandals. Eleanor of Aquitaine, known for her bold fashion, faced criticism in the French court for her colorful Aquitanian gowns, seen as frivolous by austere clerics. Yet in England, she used her wardrobe to project strength, her gold-embroidered mantle signaling her wealth and authority as regent for Richard the Lionheart. Similarly, Isabella of Castile, in the late 15th century, chose simple yet regal attire, often white or gold, to reflect her piety and unity with Ferdinand Aragon, reinforcing Spain's image as a Christian powerhouse. A poorly chosen color or a tarnished jewel could be read as weakness, making every outfit a political act. Public ceremonies amplified this scrutiny. Coronations, feasts, and religious festivals were stages where queens performed their roles for nobles, clergy, and commoners alike. During these events, their behavior, how they walked, whom they greeted, how long they prayed, was analyzed for meaning. Matilda of England, fighting for her crown in the 1140s, used public appearances to assert her claim, her regal bearing at feasts or masses a reminder of her royal blood. Yet her stern demeanor drew accusations of arrogance, showing how even a queen's posture could shift alliances. These moments required queens to project perfection, their every move a calculated display to maintain the crown's prestige. Soft power was a queen's greatest asset on this public stage. Denied the formal authority of kings, queens influenced policy through subtle means, patronage, relationships, and carefully timed gestures. Blanche of Castile, regent of France, mastered this art. As regent for her son, Louis IX, she used public appearances to build loyalty, hosting lavish feasts to win over nobles, while funding monasteries to secure the church's support. Her gentle demeanor masked a sharp political mind, allowing her to negotiate treaties and quell rebellions without appearing to overstep her role. This delicate balance, exerting influence while embodying feminine ideals, was the essence of queenship, a skill honed through years of navigating the court's watchful eyes. Patronage was a key strategy. By commissioning art, music, or architecture, queens shaped their kingdom's cultural and political landscapes. Eleanor of Aquitaine's support for troubadours spread the ideals of courtly love, not just as poetry, but as a cultural force that strengthened her court's prestige. Her patronage drew loyalty from artists and nobles, creating a network of support that sustained her through crises. Similarly, Philippa of Hainault, wife of Edward III of England, funded merchants and artisans, boosting England's economy while reinforcing her image as a benevolent queen. These acts were strategic, weaving a web of loyalty that bolstered a queen's influence without challenging male authority. Diplomacy was another tool of soft power. Queens, often foreign-born, used their ties to their native lands to broker peace or alliances. Isabella of France, married to Edward II, negotiated with her French family to ease tensions during England's conflicts in the early 14th century. Her public role as a mediator, greeting envoys, hosting banquets, allowed her to shape policy while appearing dutiful. Later, when Edward's rule faltered, she leveraged these connections to depose him. Ruling as regent for her son, Edward III, her actions, cloaked in maternal duty, show how queens used the public stage to wield power, their influence hidden in plain sight. The psychological cost of this life was immense. Maintaining a perfect facade, graceful, pious, composed, required suppressing fear, anger, or exhaustion. A queen's emotions were a liability. A moment of frustration could be twisted into a scandal, as it was for Margaret of Anjou during England's Wars of the Roses. Her fierce leadership was branded as unwomanly, her public displays of strength used to vilify her. The constant performance eroded mental health, with no space for vulnerability. Even trusted attendants could betray confidences, forcing queens to guard their thoughts as closely as their actions. This isolation, coupled with the pressure to perform, led to chronic stress, a burden carried in silence. The court's physical demands added to this strain. Long hours standing or kneeling during ceremonies, wearing heavy gowns that chafed and restricted, left queens physically drained. Travel, a frequent necessity, meant days in jolting litters or on horseback, exposed to weather and disease. Philippa of Hainault, who accompanied Edward III on campaigns, endured grueling journeys across England and France, her public appearances masking the toll of dust, rain, and fatigue. Yet she had to maintain an image of vitality, her exhaustion hidden to preserve the crown's strength. Religion played a dual role on the stage. Queens were expected to embody Christian virtue, their public piety a cornerstone of their legitimacy. Daily masses, pilgrimages, and charitable acts were performances of faith, watched by clergy and nobles. Blanche of Castile's frequent donations to churches reinforced her authority as regent, her piety a shield against criticism. But any lapse missing a mass, appearing distracted, could fuel accusations of impiety, as it did for Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose vibrant style clashed with expectations of somber devotion. Religion was both a tool and a trap, amplifying the pressure to perform flawlessly. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Matilda or Isabella, standing before a crowd at a royal feast, her smile unwavering as she navigates a sea of watchful eyes. Her gown is a masterpiece of symbolism, her words carefully chosen, yet her heart races with the weight of the performance. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a stage where every moment tested her poise and cunning. The public life of a queen was a relentless act, her power woven through gestures and appearances, her true self buried beneath the demands of duty. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from the hall, her composure intact, but her spirit strained by the relentless spotlight. Beyond the public stage lay the private struggles of motherhood, where the pressure to produce heirs and raise political pawns tested her body and soul. Let's step into that world now, exploring the perils of childbirth, the distance of royal parenting, and the emotional weight of a queen's most sacred role. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a quiet chamber where dawn's first light filters through a narrow window, casting soft shadows across a canopied bed. The air carries the faint scent of lavender and wax, and a queen, her face etched with both resolve and weariness, cradles a newborn child under the watchful eyes of her attendants. Whether you're re-listening from a tranquil village where the morning unfolds in stillness, or a vibrant city where the day hums with energy, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and let me know how these stories of the past touch your heart or spark your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past are waiting to share their tales, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we stepped onto the public stage of queenship, where women like Blanche of Castile and Eleanor of Aquitaine performed under relentless scrutiny. Their every gesture a political act, their appearance a symbol of power. Their lives were a delicate dance of soft power and public facade, their resilience forged in the spotlight of the court. Now we turn to one of the most profound and perilous roles they played: motherhood. This is part 9 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we explore queenly motherhood, the dangers of childbirth, the heartbreak of infant mortality, the distance imposed by royal parenting, and the political weight of raising children as dynastic assets. For queens, motherhood was not just a personal bond, but a public duty, where love was entwined with strategy, and every birth carried the weight of a kingdom. Picture a queen, perhaps Jane Seymour, lying in a grand bed in 1537, her body exhausted from the ordeal of childbirth. The room is crowded with midwives, physicians, and courtiers, their eyes fixed on the swaddled infant boy, Edward VI, the long-awaited heir to Henry VIII's throne. But Jane's relief is fleeting. Her strength ebbs as fever sets in, a silent threat that will claim her life within days. Childbirth was a battlefield, and queens, despite their wealth, faced the same perils as common women: hemorrhage, infection, and the limits of primitive medicine. Jane's death at just 28 was a stark reminder of the risks queens endured to fulfill their primary duty, producing heirs to secure the dynasty. Childbirth was a public event, its outcome a matter of state. When a queen went into labor, the court held its breath, waiting for news of a son. The birthing chamber was no private sanctuary. It was filled with attendants to witness the child's legitimacy, their presence turning an intimate moment into a spectacle. Isabella of Valois, married to Richard II of England at 6, faced these pressures later in life, her youth no shield against the expectation to bear heirs. Though her marriage produced no children before Richard's deposition, the court's scrutiny of her body began early, her fertility a topic of gossip even as a child. For queens, the act of giving birth was not just physical but political, their success or failure shaping their legacy. The dangers of childbirth were relentless. Without modern obstetrics, maternal mortality was high, with infections like puerperal fever claiming countless lives. Midwives relied on herbal remedies and prayers, while physicians offered treatments like bloodletting or toxic concoctions, often worsening the outcome. Eleanor of Aquitaine, who bore 8 children in the 12th century, survived multiple deliveries, but each carried risks of complications or death. The heavy, restrictive clothing queens wore, corsets and layered gowns, compressed organs, making labor even more grueling. Repeated pregnancies, often yearly, left queens physically depleted, their bodies aged beyond their years. Isabella of Castile, who bore 5 children while ruling Spain, suffered chronic pain and exhaustion, her health sacrificed to the demands of dynasty. Infant mortality was another heartbreak. In an era where half of all children died before adulthood, queens faced the loss of their babies to disease, malnutrition, or accidents. Eleanor of Aquitaine lost several children, including her young son William, whose death in infancy was a private grief born in public silence. Queens could not mourn openly. Their losses were politicized, seen as signs of divine disfavor or weakness. Catherine of Aragon, married to Henry VIII, endured 6 pregnancies, but only one child, Mary, survived infancy. Each miscarriage or stillbirth was a public failure, her grief compounded by the court's whispers and Henry's growing impatience. The pressure to conceive again immediately after loss left no time for healing, turning motherhood into a cycle of hope and sorrow. Royal parenting was distant, shaped by the needs of the crown. Queens rarely raised their children themselves. Wet nurses, tutors, and governesses took over, preparing heirs for their political roles. Children were assets, not just loved ones, their upbringing a matter of state. Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry VII of England, saw her son raised by others after his birth in 1457, their bond limited by her political struggles to secure his claim during the Wars of the Roses. When they reunited, their relationship was more strategic than maternal, her love channeled into arranging his marriage and throne. This distance was standard. Queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine saw their children sent to foreign courts for marriage alliances, their childhood sacrificed to diplomacy. The political weight of motherhood was immense. Queens were expected to produce heirs to secure the succession and daughters to forge alliances through marriage. Every child was a pawn in the dynastic game, their futures planned from birth. Isabella of Castile orchestrated marriages for her children to strengthen Spain's position, linking her daughter Catherine to England's Tudor dynasty and her son Juan to the Habsburgs. These matches were triumphs of strategy, but they came at a cost. Her children were sent far from home, their lives shaped by politics rather than love. Queens had to negotiate these alliances while ensuring their children's education reflected royal values, a task that required balancing maternal instinct with statecraft. The court's scrutiny made motherhood even more challenging. Every pregnancy, every birth was a public event, with courtiers betting on the outcome. A queen's fertility was a measure of her worth, her failures a source of gossip. Margaret of Anjou, queen during England's Wars of the Roses, faced rumors that her son Edward, born in 1453 after 8 years of marriage, was illegitimate, a slander fueled by her enemies to undermine her. The court's obsession with heirs turned personal moments into political battles. with queens forced to defend their children's legitimacy while maintaining composure. This scrutiny extended to their parenting. A queen who seemed too attached risked being seen as weak, while one too distant was called cold. Religion shaped motherhood's expectations. Queens were seen as vessels of divine will, their fertility a sign of God's favor. Failure to produce heirs could be interpreted as punishment, prompting calls for prayer or pilgrimage. Catherine of Aragon's devout faith sustained her through her losses, but it couldn't just shield her from accusations of divine disfavor when she failed to produce a son. The Church, a powerful force, urged queens to embody the Virgin Mary's purity, adding spiritual pressure to their physical burdens. Yet religion also offered solace. Queens like Eleanor endowed chapels or prayed for their children's survival, their faith a refuge in a world of loss. The psychological toll of queenly motherhood was profound. Queens grieved in silence, their losses hidden to maintain the crown's strength. The distance from their children, coupled with the pressure to produce more, left many isolated. Margaret Beaufort, separated from her son Henry for years, poured her energy into securing his throne, her love expressed through political maneuvering rather than embrace. The constant cycle of pregnancy, loss, and public judgment wore on queens, their resilience tested by a role that demanded both heart and strategy. Yet some found agency in motherhood, using their children's alliances to shape kingdoms, as Isabella did, her daughters' marriages forging Europe's future. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Catherine or Margaret, gazing at her child in a rare quiet moment, her heart torn between love and duty. The court waits outside, eager for news, their whispers a constant hum. Her body aches from childbirth, her spirit from loss, yet she rises, her strength a silent defiance of the world's demands. This was the reality of queenly motherhood, not just a crown, but a crucible where love was bound by politics, and every birth was a gamble with life and legacy. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from her chamber, her resolve unbroken despite the toll of motherhood. Beyond the nursery lay deeper burdens, the psychological strain of constant scrutiny, isolation, and the need to suppress her true self. Let's step into that world now, exploring the mental toll of queenship, the coping mechanisms that sustained her, and the resilience that defined her in a court that never slept. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a dimly lit chamber where the glow of a single candle battles the encroaching shadows, casting a soft light on a queen seated by a narrow window. Her face, framed by a jeweled veil, is composed, but her eyes betray a quiet storm of thoughts. The distant toll of a chapel bell echoes, marking another day in her relentless role. Whether you're re-listening from a serene village where the morning unfolds in stillness, or a vibrant city where the day pulses with energy, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below, and let me know how these stories of the past stir your heart or spark your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past are waiting to share their tales, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we explored the profound challenges of queenly motherhood, where women like Catherine of Aragon and Margaret Beaufort faced the perils of childbirth, the heartbreak of infant mortality, and the political weight of raising dynastic heirs. Their love was bound by duty, their losses borne in silence under the court's watchful gaze. Now, we delve into the unseen burdens that weighed on their minds. This is part 10 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we uncover the psychological burdens of queenship, the chronic stress of constant scrutiny, the isolation of a life without trust, the religious conflicts that shaped their inner struggles, and the coping mechanisms that sustained them. For queens, the mind was as much a battlefield as the court. their resilience forged in a world that demanded perfection at an unbearable cost. Picture Queen, perhaps Margaret of Anjou, standing alone in a stone-walled chamber in 15th century England, her hands clasped tightly as she gazes out at a darkening sky. The court buzzes beyond her door, filled with nobles plotting against her, their whispers accusing her of ambition or disloyalty. Her husband, Henry VI, is lost to bouts of mental instability, leaving her to defend their son's claim in the Wars of the Roses. Every decision she makes to rally troops, to seek French aid draws criticism, branding her as unwomanly or a traitor. Yet she must suppress her fear, her exhaustion, her grief, presenting a facade of unshakable resolve. This was the reality of queenship, a life where the mind bore the weight of a kingdom, where every moment tested her mental fortitude. Chronic stress was a constant companion for queens. The court's relentless scrutiny turned every word, every glance, into a potential crisis. A queen's actions were dissected for political meaning, her failures magnified by rivals eager to undermine her. Margaret of Anjou's fierce leadership during England's Civil War made her a target for slander. Chroniclers called her a she-wolf, twisting her strength into a narrative of cruelty. The pressure to appear perfect, pious, graceful, composed meant suppressing emotions that could be seen as weakness. A single tear or a moment of anger could fuel rumors, destabilizing her position or her husband's rule. This vigilance, day after day, led to anxiety and exhaustion, a silent burden queens carried alone. Isolation was perhaps the heaviest psychological toll. Trust was a luxury queens could rarely afford. Surrounded by courtiers, ladies-in-waiting, and advisors, a queen was never truly alone, yet she was profoundly lonely. Even her closest companions could be spies, reporting to rival factions or foreign courts. Anne of Bohemia, wife of Richard II in the late 14th century, arrived in England as a foreign princess, her homesickness palpable in a court that viewed her Czech origins with suspicion. Her letters, though few, hint at a longing for connection, her kindness to her ladies tempered by the knowledge that they might betray her. Queens learn to guard their thoughts, their true selves locked away, their hearts a fortress against a world that watched for weakness. Foreign queens faced unique challenges. As outsiders, they were often scapegoated for political failures or dynastic crises. Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess married to Henry VIII, endured this isolation in England, her inability to produce a male heir fueling accusations that her foreign blood was cursed. Her faith sustained her, but her loneliness grew as Henry's court turned against her, her once warm relationships with courtiers cooling under the weight of politics. This sense of being an outsider, coupled with the pressure to prove loyalty to a new kingdom, deepened the psychological strain, leaving queens to navigate a hostile world with few allies. Religious conflicts added another layer of burden. Queens were expected to embody Christian virtue, their piety a public performance that shaped their legitimacy. Yet personal faith often clashed with political demands. Catherine of Aragon's devout Catholicism became a source of anguish when Henry sought to annul their marriage, her refusal rooted in her belief that their vows were sacred. The Church, a powerful force, could be both a refuge and a cage, urging queens to suppress doubts or fears in favor of divine obedience. Margaret of Anjou, a devout Christian, faced accusations of impiety when her political maneuvers, such as allying with France, conflicted with England's interests. Her faith weaponized against her by enemies. The medieval understanding of mental health was rudimentary, compounding these struggles. Depression and anxiety were often misdiagnosed as spiritual failings or demonic possession, leading to treatments like fasting, prayer, or even exorcism that offered no relief. Joanna of Castile, later known as the Mad, likely suffered from postpartum depression or grief after losing her husband in 1506, but her emotional struggles were labeled insanity, justifying her confinement by her son. Queens like Margaret of Anjou, whose fierce determination masked signs of strain, had no framework to address their mental health, their pain dismissed as weakness or divine punishment. This ignorance left queens to bear their burdens in silence, their resilience a private triumph. The fear of assassination or betrayal was a constant shadow. The court was a nest of intrigue, where nobles and even family members could plot against a queen. Eleanor of Aquitaine's imprisonment by her husband Henry II after supporting her sons. Rebellion in 1173 was a stark reminder of this danger. For 16 years, she was confined, her influence curtailed, yet she maintained a network of supporters, her mind sharp despite the isolation. The threat of poison, a common fear, haunted queens like Isabella of France, whose political maneuvering against Edward II made her a target for rivals. This ever-present danger forced queens to live in a state of hypervigilance, their minds taxed by the need to anticipate every threat. Coping mechanisms were limited but vital. Religion offered solace for many, with queens like Catherine turning to prayer to find strength. Private chapels became sanctuaries where they could whisper their fears to God, if not to others. Eleanor of Aquitaine found refuge in patronage, commissioning poetry and music that allowed her to express her spirit indirectly, her court a canvas for her resilience. Some queens, like Blanche of Castile, used their roles as regents to channel their energies, their political successes a counterbalance to personal struggles. Others turned to secret rituals, writing unsent letters, as Margaret of Anjou may have done, or keeping small tokens of their homeland, as Anne of Bohemia did, to anchor themselves in a world that offered little stability. The psychological toll was compounded by the physical demands of queenship. Constant travel, heavy gowns, and the strain of childbirth, as we saw in earlier episodes, left queens physically drained, their mental resilience tested by bodily exhaustion. Philippa of Hainault, wife of Edward III, endured grueling journeys across England and France, her public composure hiding the fatigue that gnawed at her spirit. The need to maintain a perfect facade smiling through pain, suppressing grief eroded mental health, leaving queens to navigate their inner struggles alone. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Margaret or Anne, standing by her chamber window, her gaze distant as she wrestles with unspoken fears. The court waits beyond her door, their whispers a constant hum, yet she must face them with a smile, her heart a locked vault. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a crucible where the mind bore the weight of scrutiny, isolation, and fear. The psychological burdens tested their endurance, their resilience a silent triumph in a world that demanded everything. As we linger in this world, picture the queen stepping from her chamber, her resolve steel despite the strain, ready to face the court once more. Beyond the mental toll lay physical dangers, toxic remedies, contaminated food, and environments that threatened her survival. Let's step into that world now, exploring the medical risks, the harsh realities of castle life, and the physical challenges that tested a queen's strength in the heart of her realm. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a shadowed chamber where the faint glow of a fire battles the chill of stone walls, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and burning herbs. A queen, her face pale beneath a jeweled veil, sits as a physician prepares a murky tonic, its acrid smell promising healing but hiding danger. Whether you read listening from a tranquil village, where the morning unfolds in quiet hues, or a bustling city where the day hums with life, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments below. And let me know how these stories of the past touch your heart or spark your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history bring you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. Countless voices from the past await, and I'd love for you to walk this path with me. In our last episode, we uncovered the psychological burdens of queenship, where women like Margaret of Anjou and Catherine of Aragon bore the weight of chronic stress, isolation, and religious conflicts, their resilience forged in a court that demanded perfection. Their minds were battlegrounds, their emotions suppressed under relentless scrutiny. Now, we turn to the physical dangers that threaten their very survival. This is part 11 of our 12-part series, Boring History, What Life Was Really Like for Medieval Queens. Today, we explore the medical and physical dangers queens face: primitive treatments, toxic cosmetics, contaminated environments, and the relentless toll of their roles. Their bodies were as much at risk as their reputations, their endurance a testament to their strength in a perilous world. Picture a queen, perhaps Philippa of Hainault, in a 14th century English castle, her breath shallow as she endures another session of bloodletting, a physician's lancet piercing her arm to balance her humors. Her heavy gown, layered with furs, presses against her frame, exacerbating the ache in her back from years of pregnancies and travel. The court watches, their whispers speculating on her health, for a queen's frailty could signal weakness in the kingdom itself. This was the reality of queenship, a life where every ailment was a political crisis, and survival demanded resilience against a world of unseen threats. Medicine in the Middle Ages was a gamble, rooted in superstition and flawed theories. The prevailing humoral theory held that illness stemmed from imbalances in bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Treatments like bloodletting, using leeches or knives, were standard, even for queens, but often weakened the body further, inviting infection. Isabella of France, wife of Edward II, underwent such treatments for recurring fevers in the early 14th century, her strength sapped by sessions that left her vulnerable to worse ailments. Herbal remedies, while sometimes effective, were often laced with toxins like mercury, lead, or arsenic, prescribed for everything from headaches to infertility. These concoctions could cause organ damage, hair loss, or even death, yet queens had little choice but to accept them, their health a matter of state. Toxic cosmetics were another silent danger. Queens were expected to embody divine beauty, their appearance a symbol of the kingdom's prosperity. Lead-based powders used to whiten skin were a staple, but they poisoned the body over time, causing skin lesions, tremors, or kidney failure. Berengaria of Navarre, wife of Richard the Lionheart, likely used such cosmetics in the 12th century to maintain her regal image, unaware of their long-term harm. Her delicate complexion, admired by chroniclers, came at a cost, her health eroded by the very tools meant to enhance her beauty. Vermilion, a mercury-based blush, and coal-containing lead further compounded these risks, causing chronic pain or neurological damage. Even hair treatments, metal combs, and lead-dusted powders led to scalp infections or headaches, a hidden price for perfection. The environments queens inhabited were equally hazardous. Castles, though grand, were damp, drafty, and poorly sanitized. Mold clung to stone walls, and smoky fires filled rooms with soot, aggravating respiratory issues. Eleanor of Aquitaine, who traveled between castles in France and England, faced these conditions constantly, her health strained by cold winters and smoky halls. Food posed another threat. Even royal kitchens struggled with contamination. Spoiled meat, tainted water, or bread laced with ergot fungus, causing convulsions or hallucinations, were common risks. Queens like Matilda of England, fighting for her crown in the 1140s, endured such dangers during campaigns, her meals as much a gamble as her battles. Dental decay, worsened by sugary diets and no modern dentistry, left queens with chronic toothaches, their pain hidden behind composed smiles at banquets. Childbirth, as we saw in Part 9, was a leading cause of death, but its physical toll lingered. Repeated pregnancies, often yearly, left queens like Isabella of Castile physically depleted, their bodies aged beyond their years. Corsets and heavy gowns, required for public appearances, compressed organs and restricted breathing, exacerbating postpartum recovery or chronic pain. Jane Seymour's death in 1537 from puerperal fever, days after birthing Edward VI, was a grim reminder of these risks. Even survivors like Eleanor of Aquitaine carried physical scars, weakened bones, chronic fatigue from the strain of multiple deliveries in an era without anesthesia or sterile conditions. Travel, a frequent necessity, added to these dangers. Queens accompanied their husbands on diplomatic missions or military campaigns, enduring days in jolting litters or on horseback. Philippa of Hainault, who traveled with Edward III across England and France, faced storms, muddy roads, and disease outbreaks, her heavy attire soaking up rain or dust. These journeys were not just physically taxing, but exposed queens to illnesses like dysentery or plague, which swept through crowded camps or ports. In 1348, Philippa narrowly escaped the Black Death while in Calais, a reminder of how even royalty was vulnerable in a world without sanitation or vaccines. The court's scrutiny turned these physical challenges into political liabilities. A queen's health was never private. Every cough, every absence from a feast, was noted by courtiers eager for gossip. Illness could be interpreted as divine disfavor or weakness, threatening the kingdom's stability. Anne of Bohemia, wife of Richard II, died of plague in 1394 at 28, her death sparking rumors of poisoning or God's judgment, despite being a natural tragedy. Queens had to hide ailments, performing their duties through pain or fever. Margaret of Anjou, leading the Lancastrian cause in the 15th century, concealed chronic fatigue to maintain her authority. Her strength a facade for a court that watched for any crack in her resolve. Medical treatments were often public, adding humiliation to suffering. Physicians, usually men with limited practical knowledge, examined queens before an audience of attendants, their diagnoses debated as if they were state policy. Isabella of France endured such scrutiny, her treatments for fevers discussed openly, her discomfort a spectacle. The lack of privacy extended to the birthing chamber, where courtiers witnessed deliveries to ensure legitimacy, turning even the most intimate moments into public events. This exposure forced queens to endure pain in silence, their dignity sacrificed to the demands of their role. Yet, queens found ways to cope. Some, like Eleanor, turned to religious patronage, endowing hospitals or praying for divine protection, their faith a shield against physical and political threats. Others, like Philippa, supported apothecaries, experimenting with safer remedies, though these were rare. Small acts of agency, choosing a trusted midwife, avoiding the most toxic cosmetics, allowed queens to reclaim some control, even as their bodies faced relentless risks. Their resilience was remarkable, their ability to endure pain and danger a silent testament to their strength. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Isabella or Anne, sitting in a drafty hall as a physician applies a stinging poultice, her composure unwavering despite the pain. Her gown chafes, her body aches from travel and childbirth, yet she must smile for the court, her health a state secret. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a crucible where survival demanded endurance against unseen dangers. The physical risks, from toxic remedies to contaminated food, tested their bodies as fiercely as the court tested their minds. As we linger in this world, picture the queen rising from her seat, her strength defying her frailty, ready to face the court once more. Beyond these dangers lay the lasting legacy of these women, their influence enduring through the ages despite the trials they faced. Let's step into that world now, exploring how queens like Eleanor and Isabella shaped history, leaving marks that outlasted their reigns and redefined the role of women in power. As we linger in the world of medieval queens, envision a grand hall where the fading light of dusk filters through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across stone floors worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air hums with the scent of old parchment and flickering candles, and a queen, her crown glinting faintly, gazes out at a kingdom she has shaped through sacrifice and cunning. Whether you re-listening from a quiet village where twilight wraps the world in calm, or a bustling city where evening sparks with life, I'm so grateful you're here with me. I do love to hear where you're rejoining me from. Share your setting in the comments. The low at 8:39 MPKT on Saturday, July 12th, 2025. And let me know how these stories of the past stir your heart or ignite your curiosity. If these gentle journeys through history have brought you calm or wonder, please consider subscribing. This is the final chapter of our series, but countless voices from the past still await, and I'd love for you to walk new paths with me. In our last episode, we explored the medical and physical dangers queens face, toxic remedies, contaminated environments, and the relentless toll of childbirth endured under the court's watchful gaze. Women like Philippa of Hainault and Isabella of France battled their bodies' frailties while maintaining an image of strength, their survival a testament to their resilience. Now we close our 12-part series, Boring History, what life was really like for medieval queens, by reflecting on their enduring legacy. Today, we delve into how queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine, Blanche of Castile, and Isabella of Castile shaped history through cultural patronage, political maneuvering, dynastic alliances, and the redefinition of women's roles in power. Their lives were a crucible of trials, yet their influence echoes through the ages, challenging myths and revealing the true power of queenship. Picture a queen, perhaps Eleanor of Aquitaine, in the twilight of her life, standing in a monastery she founded, its stone arches a testament to her vision. It's the late 12th century, and her hair, once fiery, is streaked with silver, but her eyes still burn with the sharpness that made her a legend. She has outlived 2 husbands, borne 8 children, and endured 16 years of imprisonment. Yet her influence lingers in the courts of England and France. Through her patronage of troubadours, she spread the ideals of courtly love, shaping European culture for centuries. Her children, married into Europe's great houses, wove a web of alliances that redefined the continent's politics. This was the legacy of a medieval queen, not just in crowns or heirs, but in the lasting marks they left on history's tapestry. Cultural patronage was a cornerstone of their influence. Queens used their wealth and status to commission art, literature, and architecture, shaping their kingdom's identities. Eleanor of Aquitaine, as Queen of France and later England, fostered a vibrant court culture, her support for poets and musicians creating a legacy that outlasted her reign. The romances and songs of her troubadours spread ideals of chivalry and love, influencing literature from Creton de Troyes to Dante. Similarly, Isabella of Castile, in the late 15th century, funded scholars and artists, laying the groundwork for Spain's golden age. Her patronage of education, including the first printed books in Spain, elevated her kingdom's cultural prestige, while her support for Columbus's voyages reshaped the world. These acts were not mere generosity. They were strategic, cementing a queen's influence in a male-dominated world. Political maneuvering was another pillar of their legacy. Denied formal authority, queens wielded soft power through diplomacy, alliances, and subtle influence. Blanche of Castile, regent of France for her son Louis IX in the 13th century, quelled rebellions, negotiated treaties, and managed the royal treasury, her steady hand preserving France's stability. Her regency set a precedent for female governance, proving women could rule with authority while maintaining the facade of feminine humility. Isabella of France, in the early 14th century, orchestrated the deposition of her husband Edward II, ruling as regent for her son Edward III, though her actions earned her the nickname She-Wolf. They secured her son's throne and reshaped England's political landscape. These queens, through their cunning, left marks on governance that echoed beyond their lifetimes. Dynastic alliances were perhaps their most enduring contribution. Queens used their children to forge ties across Europe, creating networks that shaped the continent's future. Eleanor of Aquitaine's daughters married into the houses of Castile, Sicily, and Germany, weaving a web of influence that strengthened her legacy. Her sons, Richard the Lionheart and John, carried her bloodline to England's throne, their reigns shaped by her guidance. Isabella of Castile's children were even more pivotal. Her daughter Catherine married into England's Tudor dynasty, while her daughter Joanna's marriage to the Habsburgs united Spain with the Holy Roman Empire, creating a superpower that dominated Europe for centuries. These alliances, born of a queen's motherhood, were strategic triumphs, their impact felt for generations. The redefinition of women's roles in power was a subtler but profound legacy. Medieval queens challenged the era's constraints, proving women could wield influence despite societal limits. Matilda of England, fighting for her crown in the 1140s, faced accusations of unwomanly ambition, yet her struggle paved the way for future female rulers. Her persistence, though she never fully secured the throne, showed that a woman's claim could not be dismissed. Margaret of Anjou, leading the Lancastrian cause in the 15th century, defied expectations of passivity, her fierce leadership reshaping perceptions of queenship, even if chroniclers vilified her. These women, by navigating the delicate balance of power and femininity, expanded the boundaries of what women could achieve. Their legacies inspiring later queens like Elizabeth I. The personal cost of these legacies was immense. Queens faced relentless scrutiny, their every action judged by a court eager for weakness. Eleanor's imprisonment for supporting her son's rebellion against Henry II cost her 16 years of freedom, yet she emerged to govern as regent, her resilience undimmed. Blanche of Castile endured the loss of children and the strain of regency, her piety and cunning sustaining her through crises. Isabella of Castile battled chronic illness and political opposition, her vision for a unified Spain achieved at the expense of her health. Their legacies were not just in their triumphs, but in their endurance, their ability to shape history despite physical and psychological tolls. Religion played a dual role in their legacies. As patrons of the church, queens like Blanche and Isabella founded monasteries and funded reforms, aligning their reigns with divine authority. Their piety strengthened their legitimacy, but it also bound them to expectations of virtue, their personal struggles hidden behind a facade of sanctity. Catherine of Aragon's devout faith, while a source of strength, became a weapon against her when Henry VIII sought annulment, her legacy tied to her refusal to yield. Religion was both a tool and a burden, shaping how queens were remembered in a world that revered divine order. The myths of queenship, fairy tale heroines, or scheming villains often overshadow their true legacies. Chroniclers, mostly male, painted queens like Margaret of Anjou as manipulative or Eleanor as scandalous, their strength twisted into narratives of excess. Yet their real impact lay in their ability to navigate a world that constrained them to wield power through subtlety and sacrifice. Their courts became cultural hubs, their children reshaped dynasties, and their resilience challenged gendered norms. They were not perfect, some, like Isabella of France, made ruthless choices, but their flaws make their achievements more human, their legacies more profound. Let's pause to imagine our queen, perhaps Isabella or Eleanor, standing in a quiet chapel, her legacy etched in the stone walls she funded, the alliances she forged, the culture she shaped. Her body is weary, her heart scarred by loss, Yet her influence endures, a testament to her strength. This was the reality of queenship, not just a crown, but a crucible where sacrifice birthed lasting change. Their lives were a tapestry of trials, their legacies the threads that wove history's fabric. As we close the series, picture the queen stepping from the chapel, her gaze steady, her mark indelible. Beyond her reign lay a world transformed by her actions, her influence rippling through time. Let's step into that world now, reflecting on how these queen stories challenge our understanding of power, resilience, and the women who defied the odds to shape the medieval world.